Hello students, welcome to my channel Study with Alakesh. In this class, we are going to discuss different types of forces that are relevant towards strength of material subject for mechanical engineering. In order to understand the different types of forces, first we need to understand what do you mean by body axis, what do you mean by lateral axis, and what do you mean by longitudinal axis. So let's understand these three very small concepts in three different examples. In the very first example, this body, if you look at it from this angle, we will find that this body is standing on the ground. So this is the ground, this body is standing, correct? So if we consider this body is standing, then this axis will be called as body axis. Alright. On the other hand, this axis will be called as the lateral axis, because since we are drawing it in a paper, so it is a two-dimensional diagram, correct? So since it is two-dimensional, it will have two axes. One is x-axis and one is y-axis, correct? And since we are considering this as a standing body, then this axis will be called as body axis and this axis will be called as lateral axis. Are you getting my point? Next, let's come to this diagram. Here, by looking at the diagram, we can understand or we can assume that this body is lying on the ground. Okay? This body is lying on the ground. Now, if this body is lying on the ground, then this will be called as body axis and this will be called as the lateral axis. Okay? This will be called as lateral axis. That means the body axis mainly depends on in what position the body is in, or if the body rotates or if the body moves, then in what is the axis that it is rotating about, or what will be the axis that it is moving about. Okay? And as you can see, the angle between the body axis and lateral axis is 90 degrees. Now let's come to another topic, which is longitudinal axis. In order to understand the longitudinal axis, longitudinal means it is along the length. Always remember that. Longitudinal means it is along the length. If we consider this as a length, then this axis will be called as longitudinal axis. And automatically, the other axis will be called as lateral axis. However, it is not mandatory that length has to be always greater than width or breadth or thickness. Now we are considering, suppose we are applying a force along the longitudinal axis. We are considering a force along the longitudinal axis, and also we are applying a force along the lateral axis. Okay? Now the force which is applied along the longitudinal axis, I am talking about this force. it will be called as longitudinal force, and the force which is applied along the lateral axis, it will be called as lateral force. যদি তুমি ফোর্সটো লংগিটিউডিনেল এক্সিছৰ along the longitudinal axis তুমি এপ্লাই কৰি আছা, then it will be called as longitudinal force. আৰু যদি আমি lateral axisত এপ্লাই কৰি আছো, then it will be called as lateral force. Clear হৈছে? I hope it is clear to everybody. After completing longitudinal force and lateral force, let's come to another concept which we see very often in mechanical engineering point of view, that is called normal force. What do you mean by normal force? See, normal means it is perpendicular. First of all, it is related to 90 degree. Okay, now considering this is a body, I am trying to draw the 3D perspective of the body. Now, this part is called the cross section of the body, correct? Cross section. Now, suppose a force is applied perpendicular to this surface. Okay, force is applied perpendicular to this surface. Automatically, same amount of force I have to apply in opposite direction in the opposite surface, correct? Now, if the force that I am showing is 90 degree to the surface, then it will be called as normal force. বুঝি পাইছা না? যদি ফোর্সটো যদি 90 ডিগ্রি হৈ আছে, that means this is a base, so this is the surface. If the force is acting like this, that means this force is perpendicular to this part, this paper, right? Then this force will be called as normal force. This force is called as normal force. Are you getting my point? And if it is not 90 degree, then this will be called as inclined force. Then that will be called as, if not 90 degree, then incline, then it will be called as inclined force. বুঝি পাইছা? Now we are going to discuss another very important concept that is called as shear force. Okay, now suppose, see, till now we have discussed the force which are normal to the surface. That means suppose there is a body, so force will be acting like this. Okay, but just imagine if এটা ফোর্স এনেকাও লাগি যাব পাৰে, যাৰ ৰিজাল্টটো কেনেকুৱা হ'ব, এনেকুৱা. The result will be like this. That means it will try to displace the upper portion of the body. Suppose this is the body. If we are applying the force here, that means obviously it will try to distort the body like this. Are you getting my point? Now, in this case, the application of the force, suppose this is F, and we are applying the force on this surface, correct? On this surface. We are applying the force on this surface. All right? So, what is the angle between force and the surface? It is parallel, right? It is parallel. Are you getting my point? That means it is acting tangentially. Are you getting my point? That means it is acting tangentially. Here, force is applied along the cross section, along the cross section. That means angle has to be either 0 degree or 180 degree. That means parallel. That means parallel in nature. Are you getting my point? Here force is not acting perpendicularly. Here force is acting parallelly or tangentially on the surface. Please remember, this force is called as shear force. Okay, now we are going to discuss another two concepts. It's a very important concepts that is called as tensile force and compressive force. Okay, now suppose we are considering this body. Okay, this is the length and this is the breadth or width. Okay, etu dik buli ko ami okhomiyat ar etu prostho buli ko. We are applying a force and let's assume that force is high enough or large enough to deform the body. Okay, so obviously what will happen, the length will get increased and the breadth will get decreased. বুঝি পাইছা নাই? লেংথটো বাঢ়ি যাব আৰু বলটো কি হ'ব, কমি যাব। এটা এটা কমন সেন্স হয় না? এই যেটো ফোর্স আমি লগালো, the force that we have applied here will be called as tensile force. Are you getting my point? Tensile force means where আমি যোনটো ডিরেকশন আমি লগাম ফোর্সটো, হ্যাঁ, that dimension will get increased and the other dimension will get decreased. Are you getting my point? So in this case we are applying it along the length, so the length is increased but the breadth is decreased. In the same way, if we consider, so basically the result will be what? The new length L1 is greater than L, that is the initial length, and the new breadth B1 is less than the initial length, breadth, that is B. Now let's come to the next force, that is called as compressive force. The name itself says compressive means we are pressing it against each other. So now we are applying the force, in such a way that the body gets squeezed. Body to কি হৈ গৈছে, চেপি গৈছে, মানে আলটিমেটলি চেপি যোৱাৰ লগে কি হৈ গৈছে, লেংথ to কি হৈ গৈছে, কমি গৈছে, the length is decreased, but since the body is not, means the volume remain constant, so the breadth has to get increased. breadth to কি হৈ গৈছে, বাঢ়ি গৈছে। বুজি পাইছা নাই? আচ্ছা, ইমান এই দুটা বস্তু সদায় মন কৰিবা, আমাৰ ভলিউম কনষ্টেণ্ট থাকিব লাগিব। উই আৰ নট, ভলিউম ইজ সেম। দ্যাটছ ৱাই য'ত এটা ডাইমেনশ্যন যদি বাঢ়ি গৈছে, এটা ডাইমেনশ্যন কি হৈ গৈছে, অট'মেটিকেলি কমি গৈছে। ইয়াতে এটা ডাইমেনশ্যন কমি গৈছে বাট এটা ডাইমেনশ্যন বাঢ়ি গৈছে। আমি বস্তুটো ফ্ৰেকচাৰ কৰা নাই, আমি বস্তুটো ডিষ্টৰ্টেড কৰিছোঁ। আৰু গেটিং মাই পইণ্ট? চ' এইটো কি বুলি ক'ব, আমাৰ কম্প্ৰেছিভ ফ'ৰ্চ বুলি ক'ব। In compressive force, the L1 is less than L, that is the initial length, and the B1 is greater than B, that is the initial breadth. Are you getting my point? এতিয়া এই ডায়াগ্ৰামটোত যদি তুমি চোৱা ভালকৈ, this dimension, the force is acting longitudinally along the length. So automatically এইটো যিটো ডিফৰ্মেশ্যন হ'ব, এইটো লংগিটিউডিনেল ডিফৰ্মেশ্যন বুলি ক'ব। আৰু এইটো বাঢ়ি যোৱাৰ লগে লগে এইটো যে কমি আহিল, এইটো কি ডিৰেকশ্যন কমি আহিল, এইটো আহিল লেটাৰেল ডিৰেকশ্যন কমি আহিছে। অ'কে, ডেট মিনছ ইফ দিছ ডাইমেনশ্যন ইজ ইনক্ৰিজড ইন লংগিটিউডিনেল ডিৰেকশ্যন, automatically the breadth is decreased along the lateral direction. Are you getting my point? Means the change will occur in both the axes, one in the longitudinal axis and one in the lateral axis. Okay, more details about this change we'll discuss it in the next class. Okay, so till now we have discussed various topics such as we have discussed body axis, we have discussed lateral axis, we have discussed the longitudinal axis, we have discussed various force related to this axis. Okay. Now, see here, the tensile force and the compressive force, these are basically depends on the nature of the application of force. Okay. Okay. So if there is any doubt, on the force topic, you can raise your doubts on the comment section. And if you like this video, share it among your friends and subscribe to the channel. Thank you and take care.